The lights dimmed as the crowd whispered in awe, that expectant hush that comes before something unforgettable. The air buzzed with 1,000 heartbeats, every soul waiting to see if the rumor was true. No one on this small stage had a famous name. No record label, no glittering costumes, no sign that this night would be anything more than another open mic. But when the first note hit, time seemed to stop. It wasn't just a sound. It was a reincarnation of legends. A young man stepped to the microphone, nerves visible in the shake of his hands. His eyes were shy, but his voice, when it rose, was a haunting echo of Freddie Mercury himself. It began soft, like the breeze before a storm, then exploded into pure emotion. Every note soared. Every word carried the spirit of someone who once turned music into magic. The audience gasped. Phones were raised, mouths hung open. They could not believe that this was real. The man on stage looked like a nobody, but he sounded like history reborn. When he finished, there was no sound for a moment, just stunned silence. Then the applause came, thunderous, unstoppable. He smiled, half in disbelief, half in relief. Behind him, the band exchanged glances. They knew the night had only just begun, because he wasn't the only one who had that gift. The next performer walked out quietly. A girl no older than 20, dressed simply, her hair tied back. She took the microphone like she was afraid of it. The pianist nodded, and the melody began. Slow, soulful, aching with beauty. Then came her voice, and it was as if Whitney Houston had stepped back into the world. Every note shimmered. Every breath carried power wrapped in velvet. People began to cry, not because of nostalgia but because they could feel the same raw soul, the same truth. She wasn't imitating. She was channeling. In the corner, the old sound engineer wiped a tear from his cheek. He had recorded hundreds of voices in his life, but this was different. He turned a knob and whispered, "They sound exactly like the legends." As the night continued, one by one, the singers took the stage. Each carried a piece of the past, a fragment of those who once ruled the airwaves. There was a boy who sang like Elvis, every word dripping with charm, every growl full of fire. He swung his hips and smiled that half smile that could melt a million hearts. The women in the crowd screamed, phones shaking as they tried to capture the impossible. Then came the soft-spoken man in the corner. Nobody noticed him at first, sitting quietly with his guitar. When he strummed the first chord, a ripple of curiosity went through the room. His voice was rough, full of dust and whiskey, the kind that made people close their eyes and forget where they were. It was the sound of Johnny Cash reborn, deep, soulful, full of shadows. He didn't need lights or applause. His sound alone filled the space with stories older than time. The host looked around, shaking his head in disbelief. It felt like a dream, like the spirits of music's greatest voices had decided to live again, not in fame or fortune, but in ordinary people. Each performer sang as if the song had chosen them, not the other way around. A hush fell once more when the final act was announced. The crowd leaned forward. From behind the curtain stepped a woman wearing a long red coat. Her face was hidden by her hair, but when she raised her head, her eyes burned with quiet confidence. She didn't need an introduction. The band began to play a slow, jazzy rhythm. And when she opened her mouth, the world tilted. Her voice was Amy Winehouse. Every rasp, every ache, every piece of broken beauty. She didn't sing to impress. She sang like she was bleeding, like the words were being torn out of her soul. People in the crowd held their breath, afraid to miss even a single note. It wasn't imitation, it was resurrection. When she finished, the room was silent. No clapping, no shouting, just silence filled with awe. Then one single person began to clap, and the entire place erupted. But what made that night legendary wasn't just that they sounded like the greats. It was that they reminded everyone of why music matters. It wasn't about fame or fortune or the size of a stage. It was about emotion, the kind that can cross generations, languages, and pain. After the show, the small backstage room buzzed with excitement. The singers looked at each other, still unsure what had happened. The man who sounded like Freddie laughed nervously. "Did that really just happen?" he asked. The girl who sang like Whitney smiled. Maybe the world needed to remember what real music feels like. They all sat together, tired but glowing. None of them were famous, but that didn't matter. In that single night, they had carried the voices of legends and made them live again. A reporter who had been in the audience pushed through the crowd, notebook in hand, eyes wide. "You guys have no idea what you just did," she said breathlessly. "You brought back history." The Freddie look-alike laughed again. "We just sang," he said. "That's all." But she shook her head. "No, you made people believe again. You made them feel." As the night faded, videos from the performance flooded the internet. Clips went viral, shared millions of times. People couldn't believe their ears. Comment sections were full of disbelief. They sound exactly like Freddie, Whitney, Amy, Elvis. Music fans from all over the world began to argue, to celebrate, to cry. Some said it was reincarnation, others called it pure talent. But one thing was certain. Something magical had happened. Days turned into weeks, and the singers started receiving invitations. From TV shows, from music producers, from fans begging them to perform again. But they weren't chasing fame. They decided to stay together, to keep performing the songs of those who came before, not as copies but as tributes. They called themselves Echoes of the Soul. Every performance was raw, powerful, full of life. They didn't wear costumes or pretend to be anyone else. They just let the music flow through them, and every time people said the same thing. They sound exactly like the legends. Their fame grew quietly, built not on glamour but on heart. They played in small theaters, candlelit cafes, and crowded city squares. Wherever they went, strangers gathered, drawn by something they couldn't explain. There was something in those voices that reached inside and touched the part of people that still believed in miracles. One night, after another breathtaking show, an old man came to them. He was a retired producer who had once worked with some of the real legends. He looked at the group and smiled with tears in his eyes. "You kids," he said softly, "you've brought them back. Not their fame, not their faces, their souls." The girl who sang like Whitney took his hand. "We're just trying to keep the music alive," she said. He nodded. And that's exactly what they would have wanted. As the group left the theater that night, the rain began to fall softly, the streets glowing under the city lights. The Freddie sound-alike looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you." No one knew who he was thanking. Maybe the legends themselves, maybe music, maybe life. And somewhere, in that rain-soaked night, you could almost hear it. The faint echo of voices that once changed the world, now living again in new hearts, new souls, new songs. Because legends never truly die. They just find new voices to keep singing. Each show after that was a reminder that music is eternal. The audience didn't just hear. They felt. The laughter, the pain, the dreams, all alive in those familiar yet new tones. People came from miles away, some carrying old vinyl records, others wearing vintage band shirts, all searching for that one feeling they thought was lost. When the band played the last note of their final song, there was always a moment when everyone just stood there, caught between silence and eternity. In that instant, the room belonged to no time, no age, no boundary. It was just music, pure, unfiltered, and forever. And maybe, if you listen closely enough, you can still hear them. Somewhere, in a small room filled with sound and soul, ordinary voices rising into something extraordinary. They sound exactly like the legends, yes, but more than that, they remind us why legends ever mattered at all.